Welcome back to math. So yesterday we talked about place value and we talked about digits and value. Today we're going to build on that a little bit, but talking about it with tens and ones and 100s and how that'll help us multiply by 10, 100, and even 1,000. That was a lot. Just watch and you will follow along. Yesterday we talked about the digit versus value. So the digit here is 0, and with our ones it's also worth 0. The digit here is 2, but the value is worth 20. And here, the digit is 1, it's 1, but it's worth 100. So that's a quick review of what we did yesterday. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to write this down. I have hundreds, tens, and ones. And I'm going to kind of make a chart that looks like this. And hopefully you can see that. Yes, you can. So if I break up the number into different pieces, I can put the amounts in different places. So how many 100s do I have here? What's the digit? Yeah, so the value is 100 and I have one of them. How many tens do I have? So the value is 10, and I have 2 tens. How many ones do I have? 0. That is how we break down the number 120. Some people, though, might say something weird. Some people might say, well, you see 2 tens in there, but I actually see 12 tens in there. What? What do they mean by that? Well, they're just breaking up, and they're saying, this number, if I were to add 10, 12 times, I could get 120. So they say I have 12 tens. How many hundreds would they have then if they did that? Well, they used them all up here, so they would have 0 100s. How many ones would they have? Still 0 ones. Well, you could also break it down a different way slightly if you wanted. You can say, well, in this number, if I were to break it up into the smallest little piece, remember our units, strips, and mats. So this is a mat, a strip, and a unit. Mat, strip, unit, mat, strip, unit. What if I said I see 120 units in there? I see 120 units in there. And you can barely see that perfect. How many tens would that leave us? 0, because we used them all in the units. And how many 100s? 0, because we used them all in the units. So this is just a different way to look at this number. You can look at it and say I see 1 100, 2 20s, 0 ones, or 1 mat, 2 strips, 0 units. Or you can say, I don't see any 100s. I actually see 12 tens and 0 units. So if I were to build it, you could take 12 strips and make 120. Or you could take 120 little units and add them all together to get 120. So you might get asked a question like that. Someone might say, I see 2 tens in there. And someone else will say, I see 12 tens. Who's right? Well, in this case, they'd both be right. All right, moving on to our next thing here. We are going to see the relationship when we multiply by a 10 or even 100 or lastly 1,000. So if I'm multiplying by the number 16 right here, and I want to multiply it by 1. We all know that that equals 16. I'm actually going to make a ratio table of this. I love myself a ratio table. So if I have one group and it has 16 in it, how many total are there? 16. Let's say I have 2 groups of 16. I'm just showing you so we remember how to do our ratio tables. 2 groups of 16 how many total are there now? Well, that's just 16 plus 16 is 32. So remember, that's how we fill out our ratio table. Let's look at a number that we like to multiply, and you probably know how to do it, but we're going to look at it a little more closely. So 10 times 16. I'm going to get rid of this right here so we can have a closer look at these. 10 times 16. Yikes, some of you guys might not know how to do it. Well, you can just add 10 16 times. You can count by 10 16 times. Or some of you guys know the zero trick. You're like, oh, there's 1 0 at the end of the number. So I can put that over here. And now I just need to multiply 1 times 16. And you get 16. So 10 times 16 is 160. I'm going to write that in my ratio table. If I have 10 groups of 16, my total is 160. And so you guys can see what changed from going from here to here. Yeah, they both got a 0 added to it. But what really happened, that's the easy answer. What really happened is we moved these two numbers over one way in our place values. This went from being in the 1 spot and it moved over to the 10 spot. This went from being in the 1s and moved into the 10s. This went from being in the 10s and moved over to the 100s. So both these numbers, when you multiply by 10, they all shift over one place value. They get bigger one place value. So if you were multiplying by 10 and you had a number in the 10,000 spot, it would go to the next biggest spot, which is the 100,000 spot. Let's look real quick if I were to do that with some new numbers. What about 23? 1 times 23 equals, we know one group of 23 equals 23. I'm going to multiply not by 1 now, but by 10. So what does that do to my numbers? I have a 1, my digit is the 1 in the 1's place. It's going to move it over by 1 spot into the 10's place. Let me actually draw that out here. This will help explain it maybe. So I have my 1s, 10s, 100s. And over here, I'm going to make a little more space. 23 still. I'm going to have my 1s, 10s, 100s. So here it's lining up with my 100s. When I multiply by 10, it gets scooted over into the 10s now. And we have to fill in this number, so we add my 0. Same thing over here. When I multiply by 10, it gets scooted over. So my 3 that was in the 1 spot now goes to my 10 spot. My 2 that was in the 10 spot now goes to my 100s. And I have to fill in that blank with a 0. So that's why when you're multiplying by 10, we'll say it goes up a place value. That's all we're talking about, is it literally just moves over a place value. Let's try one more before this video is over. Let's say I multiply by 100 now. What happens? How many place values are we going to have to move our numbers over by? Yeah, we're going to have to move them over by 2. So I'm going to add right in here. I'm going to add thousands. So I'm going to get rid of our old multiplication problem here. So when we had 1, it was 23. Now we have 100. I have to move it over 2 spots. 1, 2. And that turns it into the 100 spot. And I add my 2 zeros to fill it in. I add my 2 zeros. I got to move this one over 2 spots to the 2000s. This one over 2 spots to the 100s, and I have to add my 2 zeros. So 100 times 23 is 2,300. A little bit messy, not Mr. B's writing, but what I want you to take away is when you're multiplying by tens, you're moving it over one place value. When you multiply it by 100, you move it over 2 place values. How many do you think you move it over when you multiply by 1,000? You're going to move it over 3 place values, or you're going to be adding 3 zeros. So that was a quick review for today. We will talk about it in whole group if you're confused. Otherwise, good luck, and I'll see you soon.